Today I'm meeting with what I believe to be a finance manager at Driscolls. He's been with the company for quite some time now and uses data in his day-to-day life. And so I just wanted to sit down with him and talk about his background, his areas of focus, and what are some of his biggest challenges using data as like I said, I think he's a finance manager, but we'll get into it as we move along the interview. So welcome, Stephen.
Okay, was that a shot at me saying you believe that I'm a finance manager? Because that was kind
Well,
of messed up.
not a shot. I actually don't know if you have your LinkedIn updated, and I got it off of there.
Oh yeah,
But I know you've had some promotions as of late, so I'm like, maybe he's, a different title. I don't know.
yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I am a finance manager. And
Okay.
right now I'm in like a transition period.
Okay, but before I wanted to talk about where you are in the company and your day to day, I really wanted to focus on kind of like the early beginnings. So like kind of how you got there. And so I guess the first question would be like, what did you study in college? Because from my recollection, it was, in par with what you're doing now. But y- I don't know if that's maybe what you plan to do after college, but if you just want to like talk a little bit about, what college you went to and what you majored in and what kind of good jobs and bad jobs, kind of led you to this position you're at now?
Yeah, so I majored in finance. And it was just general finance, so I didn't have like a specialization or anything. I did get a job at like a startup, and I could go in on that job for a while
Yeah.
because it was so weird. I mean, you already know about it. It was like uh,
If you just give like an example of something, or maybe just like in general, like
yeah, I
your
mean, in
relationship
general,
with your manager.
yeah, so in general that job, I worked with one guy who was trying to get like he was trying to get government funding for like startups that had like some new technology. Um
Okay.
and so there wasn't really much risk for those companies, but that's the basic like the idea of what he was trying to do. Was he was trying to get government funding for certain startups that maybe didn't know how to get access to this funding or didn't even know it was an option. Um and
Gotcha.
and so we would talk to or he was talking to some
Financials.
government official, and we would look at like what the company does and read about what their product is. So I was technically, I think we said I was like a it was basically like a planning analyst or some sort of analyst. There wasn't really an official title. I did a ton of things at that job. There was only like 4 or 5 of us. I also did like the QuickBooks. I did the books for the
Oh,
company.
QuickBooks. Yeah.
Yeah,
I remember
yeah,
QuickBooks.
yeah. It's super
Jeez.
exciting stuff.
Yeah, I
Um,
remember on that QuickBooks topic, I remember in like I was like, I don't know, in eighth grade or ninth grade, and my dad, he's like a contractor,
mhm.
and he's like, hey, like, can you use QuickBooks? I'm like, I mean, I can use a computer. I don't even know what QuickBooks is. And so like I had to like understand QuickBooks in like a couple of days so like I could do his like financials for like his company. And I
Oh
was
my
like, I think I'm doing it right. But then I think after that he got like a what are those called? Not accountants, but like kind of like bookkeepers, I think.
yeah, bookkeeper.
Yeah. And so that got squared away.
That's good. I'm glad he didn't have like a 6-year-old doing his books.
Yeah. It's at least 12.
Oh, okay.
Um yeah. So like you said, you went to or you majored in finance. Um You went, I don't know if you mentioned it, but you, went to the same college as me,
Mhm.
Sac State, located in the capital of California, a prestigious and very reputable
Yes,
business
very
college.
prestigious.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm. Um, and yeah, you mentioned that right after college you had worked as like an enterprise financial planner, right? In the nursery, or am I getting it
Uh,
wrong?
yeah, that's completely wrong, Andrew.
Okay.
So I started as a when I went to Driscoll's after my other weird job,
Mm-hmm.
which our friend, I mean, you actually had the first opportunity to take the job at Driscoll's, I think. I
That's
think,
true.
yeah, Caleb, our friend Caleb reached out to you and you said no. And then he reached out to me and I said yes because the company I was working at, since I did their books, I knew that he wasn't going to be able to afford to pay me after probably about a year. So I was like, well, I need to find a new place to work. And then that
Yeah.
job opened up back in Redding, California, our hometown. Well, not really hometown. I don't claim it as my hometown, just so that we're
Yeah.
clear. Um, my parents live there.
Same, same.
Um, yeah, so I was like, well, this is a perfect opportunity for me to get a job that pays a decent salary. I mean, especially for Reading, it was a good salary. I mean, I could afford to buy a house there, um, because how cheap it is to live there. But I made enough to buy a house, and then so I guess focusing on the job, I was a nursery planning analyst, which meant basically I mean, the nursery is a huge operation, and I don't know how
Yeah.
in depth you want me to go into that, but for my job, we had nursery plant orders, and we had to deal with a lot of data because we have like Driscoll's has an order for this is how much fruit they want to produce next year and 5 years from now, because
Mm.
you're creating actual plants. Like a lot of people don't know that for fruit you have to use clones of plants, not like planting seeds or anything. So
Yeah.
it takes a lot of space. And for strawberries, you have to do that in like large plots of land, which is why Reading is where the nursery is headquartered. Because Driscoll started as a strawberry company, and you grow the nursery. It was actually kind of like a innovation, where they were growing. I
Okay.
think they were growing nursery plants in a different way in different areas before. But then they found, oh, we can grow these nursery plants at high elevation, and it works a lot better. So they're growing
Interesting.
these nursery plants in the mountains, um,
Yeah.
up near what is it, MacArthur. It's a
Hmm.
very small town. But we're growing a lot of our nursery plants up at high elevation. And so that's where we would do the planning of, okay, we need to plant this many plants for our commercial nursery and this many plants for our foundation nursery, where you're doing a lot of like multiplication. So you have like the starting plants and you multiply those starting plants in a growing season. And then like it takes about 3 to 5 years to get from a like new variety of strawberries to like a commercial amount of plants available to send to growers. Which is
Wow.
if you look at like uh companies that grow fruit, they're selling most other companies are selling public varieties, and those public varieties are developed by the UC. Well, most of it's been done by UC Davis actually.
Okay. So public varieties and commercial varieties. And so the timeline on those is different. You said 3 to 5 years for commercial.
Yeah,
And
so
then,
a commercial, sorry, public variety is just like what other what UC Davis produces. A commercial variety is like talking about specifically for Driscoll's fruit. Like when you're growing a new variety, of
Hmm.
strawberries, it takes growers a while like understand how this variety performs in the field, and you they need time to get used to the variety, but then also it takes time just to get the amount of plants you need to have a commercially viable product. It's like saying, okay,
Gotcha.
we have this one variety that's really good, but we have like 10 plants. Like you need millions of plants for them to
Yeah.
be profitable.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, now that you had touched on that, I did, now that we know your title is Strawberry Finance Manager, I kind of want to get into, what that consists of. So maybe think about it first from like a data analytical viewpoint, but like what does like your month to month duties look like? And then what are like your day-to-day duties? I think that'd be interesting to know what it is that you do.
Yeah. So the fine my job is actually kind of interesting in terms of like I'm not a normal finance manager.
Okay.
I started out like we said, I started in the nursery as a planning analyst, and then I moved to the fruit section of the business as a enterprise financial analyst. And there was a lot of data involved with that. A lot of reporting, a lot of pulling data, validating data, everything like that. Then I moved into the finance manager position where I was still doing a lot of the data work for our team because there's no one else to do it. And
Yeah.
I created, so I did a lot of Tableau work for the first 3 years I was at Driscolls.
Yeah.
Um, and so I created all of our Tableau reports since we had 0.
Yeah.
Even though we had Tableau, they
Yeah.
just no one had created Tableau reports. So all of the reporting was done through Excel or, I mean, yeah, it was pretty much all Excel. So
Yeah. That It's funny that you bring up that you guys had Tableau, but nobody was using it. I feel like, not just at Driscoll's, but at tons of other companies, this is happening as well. Like they have the tools, they have the money to like get these like dashboarding tools to help them visualize what's going on in the field, but no one wants to like, build them. And
yeah, and
so with that said, I think there's, a good um, avenue for people who, let's say, are really good at Tableau to come in and be like, hey, I know Tableau really well. I can build these dashboards for you that'll help you guys see things happening, in your guys' field.
yeah, and I think a lot of people will be surprised about how involved you can get as someone who understands Tableau. Like you can go into a company and like I understood Tableau, and so we had Tableau, like I said, and
Yeah.
it's the reason I think that people aren't using it when they have the tool is because they don't know how to use it and they don't want to learn it. And
Yeah.
there's no requirement. Like the company says, here's this new tool, but they don't say you're required to use it now.
Yeah.
And so they kind of like the easy way is to just hire someone that knows Tableau and then they do all of it. But
Yeah.
when you don't have a manager that can tell this person, okay, this is what you should do, it kind of it's hard for a manager to implement something that they don't understand. Um,
Yeah.
but I mean, I think that will change because Tableau is really a simple tool. Like it's not super complicated. You can make some really complicated stuff happen with it, but as
Yeah.
you as you build onto it, you find like, oh, we need to actually manage how the Tableau reports are being created, or we need to manage like what you can upload as a Tableau report, because sometimes it's just here's the raw data or here's this really bad dashboard, and if it doesn't have some sort of like structure, then it's just not going
Hmm.
to get used.
Yeah. I think also too, like having what's the word I'm looking for? Pretty much having a solid pipeline. Cause like I feel like one of the big things, at least for me, is creating a brand new dashboard every time is one of the most like frustrating things. But if you like have this process set up where you're like, okay, this is where I get my data. This is how I'm going to read in my data, data structure and whatnot. And then that data structure will then, feed how the dashboard gets created. I think having that established, kind of I call it the pipeline, but established workflow helps a ton when you're building those dashboards.
Yeah, definitely. I it was kind of strange for me, like creating all these Tableau reports, because no one directed me to do any of it. It was just
Yeah,
I knew how to use Tableau. I had to use it in the nursery. It's a tool that we had, and there was a push to recreate reports that were in Excel. And so I
yeah,
said, okay, I'm going to use Tableau to do it. We didn't even have like a Tableau server for the group that I was in. So I had to
yeah,
get that
yeah,
Tableau server made. And then I just started creating Tableau reports, because I was a new analyst and didn't have like, I didn't really have training on how you should set up a server or how you should set up any
yeah,
reporting stuff. So it was just all like new stuff, and I just was doing it without, like, I needed to get these reports done, so I wasn't going to worry about anything other than just getting those done.
yeah,
Because I'm a very go and do it person, and not planning on how I'm going to like upkeep things hasn't ever really been something that I've thought about until now, really, until this last year, where I've gotten a lot more into project management.
yeah.
So I mean,
So you're
and
more good.
I was just gonna say, you can't really expect a new employee to understand all of that, especially someone from a finance background and not a computer science background.
Yeah. Or like what's the MIS, Management Information Systems background?
I didn't even have that background.
Yeah, same.
I took a
Um
single class on it.
yeah. No, it's funny that you come from like a finance background and are now able to, create these dashboards using data sources from wherever. And like myself, like I also don't have computer science or a MIS background, but I have a accounting background. And like you said, it's really all about you just go, there's a problem. Okay. Now, how do I fix this? And so you kind of work with kind of like a first principles mindset of like, okay, this is what I need to do. This is who I need to talk to. And then you just kind of piece the puzzle together as you go. Like, there's no, at least for me, and it sounds like for you, there was no like manual, like, oh, do this, do this. It was like, this is what we need to do. Go figure it out. And luckily, we both have that like proactive mindset of like, we're going to get this done and we're going to figure it out. We don't know how at the moment, but you best believe, we'll deliver something. And so
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
that's like one quality of like a person that for people looking to get into fields that might not have, that analytical background or data focused background is something to definitely I guess, not be discouraged, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I think that, it's interesting. I think that something if someone were to ask me, like, what they needed to learn if they were in finance, they you should start learning SQL,
Yeah.
because that's
Uh,
one thing. Like, Tableau is SQL, like, it uses SQL pretty
yeah.
much. Like, it's writing you a SQL query, and
Yeah.
learning that got me a lot more into, okay, this is how this, like, the principles work, and this is understanding kind of how the tool itself worked and how it's important in what I'm trying to do, and not necessarily just like, oh, I need to learn every part of this tool. Which
Yeah.
like I've tried to get into learning more programming languages, and I was before, but when you're not doing that on a daily basis for your job, it's really hard to
Yeah.
keep it up. Like I'm not super driven outside of work to do things.
Yeah.
So I was when I had more time, um,
Yeah.
as in like I now all of my time at work is focused on this project, and I don't have
Yeah.
any time really for like personal learning. Like before, I could be like, okay, I want to learn Python. I'm gonna write a Python program to do something for my job, like some
Yeah.
small thing because I want to learn Python, and so I'm gonna write like I created a little script that just was pulling data from a CSV or from a Excel CSV file. I was trying to join it all into one page, like one data
Yeah.
set,
Yeah.
and it worked, but
Yeah.
they were using an XLSB file, and Python didn't support that at the time. I don't know if it does, but one of the
Yeah.
I was trying to pull from 4 files, and one of them was XLSB, and it didn't work. And I was like, "Well, this sucks."
Yeah. I'm glad you brought up like if there was a language or a tool that someone should someone looking to get into this field should focus on. I'm glad you brought up SQL because like I wasn't the strongest person at SQL, but I actually have the time aside from work to kind of like learn it on my own, and it's like a super important skill that like I was able to build these dashboards on this website called Dune Analytics, which focuses on like crypto and Web3.
Mhm.
And I don't know if like I'm in the process of like applying to other companies. I don't know if that will showcase them that I know how to use SQL, but like I am kind of just excited to know it because not only can I use it there, but I can use it pretty much anywhere. Like you said, it's the basis for how the data gets ingested into these dashboards and tools and whatnot. So really glad you brought up SQL because I do think that's like probably at the top of my list for languages that someone should learn
Yeah.
looking to get into this field.
I mean, I feel like anyone should learn it
Yeah.
because it's so it's not even just like, "Oh, you need to know it to be a data analyst." Like, just understanding there's so many people I work with that are working with, like, a system or trying to understand how data is going somewhere, and it understanding, like, SQL just so you can say, like, "Okay, if I were to make a SQL pull from these 2 data sources, like, what's the common dimension? Can
Yeah.
I actually combine these 2 data sources,
Hmm.
or does it not make sense?" Like, it's a very simple it's not even something that you would even it really even matters for, like, if you're gonna write a SQL query, but just understanding, like, what's different between 2 data sets. That's, I think,
Yeah.
really important. It's really important for a lot of things, and sometimes it's not always clear that it's important until you get into it, and then you find out it is super important. Um,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of things that I do now where you're looking at just databases, or you look at this database and you say, "Okay, what do I need from this?"
Hmm.
And the thing is that a lot of people go into like I guess programming, or they go into information systems,
Hmm.
and those are the people who know programming languages and they know SQL. But a lot of the people that in finance, they also need to know it, but they don't because you don't learn it anywhere.
Yeah.
And you're only going to learn it by learning these tools like Tableau. I mean, I wasn't going to learn. We actually do use SQL Server in my current job,
Okay.
because we have a budget, or we're creating the budget, and
Hmm.
we have four separate. We use this tool called Quantrix.
Okay.
And Quantrix is just a planning tool. It uses dimension. I mean, it's just planning. Like it can input numbers, and then you have math and formulas that give you an output, and you can push to
Yeah.
SQL. So they created some pushes to SQL, and then we have one push for each of our models. But then to view that data, you have to combine it all together, because we have four berries, for one for each model. And our financials are based on all the berries together, not just one berry. We don't have a strawberry budget and a raspberry. I mean, we do, but we view them all at the same time, right? So we need to report at them all together, because if you have four different reporting areas, like it's going to get too complicated
Yeah.
when you're trying to show it to people. So I had to learn how to use the SQL Server just so that we could, like, you have to lock versions, and there's a lot of kind of back end stuff that you don't get support from your IT department on that.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it depends on the company, but most companies, you're not going to get support from IT on just sharing what the budget was that you created, because you can do it in so
Y-
many different ways.
Yeah.
And so I had to learn how SQL Server worked just so that I could load this and then export it. We have a super complicated process using like Power BI and Power Pivot, just
Okay.
to be able to see the data together,
Yeah.
which isn't something that you would think a finance manager has to do, but it it's something that a lot of companies are dealing with, where when Excel is your main tool, like how do you see that data? How do you
Yeah.
share it with other people? And
Yeah.
that's where the SQL comes in.
Yeah. So yeah, we've talked about, these hard skills, SQL, being uh good at Tableau, Power BI. But are there any soft skills you think that are important for someone to have in your role, or just in general, maybe in the analytical role of like a data analyst, or a Strawberry Finance Manager?
I do have an example that I think about a lot.
Okay.
I mean, one is project management, but that's not like under asking questions.
Okay.
Asking questions, I think, is the biggest skill
Yeah.
that I've seen for everything. Like if
Yeah.
you can ask the right questions, then you're gonna succeed.
Yeah. Especially early on too. Like, I think that's
Not even
super
early
good.
on. I mean all the time. For everything
Okay.
that you're doing, asking the right questions, because the worst thing that you can do is assume you know the answer, and you
Yeah.
assume that you know what's going on. Like, what if you're working, I mean, right now the biggest example I have is a project, this project that we're doing. It we Our whole group, we're working on this tool. We thought we knew, this is what we're doing with the project implementation team. We all thought we knew what we were doing, and it turned out we didn't. Like,
Yeah.
no one asked the right questions to say, is this actually right? Are we doing it right? Do we have the right, like, setup?
Yeah.
That's the problem, is like asking the right questions is really hard, and being able to speak up when you don't understand something, or
Yeah.
if you just assume that everyone else knows what's happening, you have to speak up and make sure.
Yeah. No,
And if y
that's
uh, I was just gonna say, if you can do that, if you can speak up and ask the right questions, then you'll instantly make a name for yourself.
yeah,
The
no.
hard part is for them to be the right questions.
Yeah. Yeah, don't you love when you're in a meeting and someone's presenting something and then you're like, huh, and then you ask a question and they're like, oh, great question, and you're like,
Oh,
oh, that is a great question.
yeah, yeah, I mean, that's where I think what's made me better at asking questions is constantly, instead of thinking about, like, what am I gonna say when I ask a
Yeah,
question, like, just thinking about, like, whatever we're talking about, how does it fall into the process, and how does it fall into my understanding? Because one of the things that's hard is that you can only ask questions once you know enough about the topic. So if you
yeah,
ask questions that you're just new and you're just asking a bunch of questions, it's not really, it depends on the context of, like, what's happening, but a lot of the times it's not really helpful if you're in a project meeting and you're just asking, like, "Oh, what is revenue?" Like, that's not a good question. You're not gonna.
yeah. Just go Google it.
Yeah, if you can Google the answer, you probably shouldn't ask the question, because
Yeah.
and a lot also, it not really asking questions, but understanding a process flow, or, like, what a
Mm,
process flow should be.
yeah,
That, I think that's like that is a question a lot of the times. Like, what is the process flow?
yeah.
And
Like, what are my
actually,
inputs? What are my outputs? Yeah.
yeah, what are my inputs? What are my outputs? And what's in between too? Like,
Yep.
what, understanding that is a skill, and it also requires a lot of questions. And that's kind of how I try to frame in my head questions, is like, how does this fit into the process? So,
Yeah.
like, I think a good example is even from today. We had a core team meeting, and they were talking about, um, we're going into this we're going live with a section of their project, and I'm in charge of the modeler team. I'm in charge of getting them through the training for Anaplan, the tool that we're using. And they were talking about in the stand up, or in the core team meeting, like, this is
Hmm.
this is what our process is going to be for hypercare, which means, like, the project team that we're working with, who's building the tool for us, is going to provide support to our modelers, and then our modelers are then going to take over, and they're going to be supported by that team. And I could have just waited for it to be done and then sent the PowerPoint to the team, but instead I was like, okay, well, how is this important to our modelers? And it seems like simple questions, but
Yeah.
no one's going to ask them for me.
Yeah.
I have to be the one to, like, as you're growing, as I've been growing as a professional, it's really easy to feel like someone's going to tell you what to do, or what the questions, what you should be doing, but they aren't going to.
Yeah.
And that's how you should always look at it, is no one's ever going to tell you what to do, and no one's ever going to ask the right question for what you need. Like, if you don't understand what's going on, you need to ask questions. And it's really easy to say that, but finding the right, I mean, for me, it was thinking about it in terms of, like, a process flow. Like, how do things fit into that? And what's important in that process too. Like,
Yeah.
that's what's made me asking questions a lot better. But I
Yeah.
haven't always
Now,
been good at that.
yeah. Now you guys see, or not you guys, but now you see why I asked so many questions in calculus. Um, and everybody hated me because I didn't understand anything at all. And the only way I could learn was to literally ask, what is sine, what is cosine, all that jargon, whatnot. But no, like you said, asking questions is, key and super important because no one's going to be there to hold your hand. They're only going to be there to help you if you ask.
Yeah.
So I know we're getting over the time here. I mean, not really. I have time, but I know have to go play some video games. But before we go, is there anything you want to plug? Your Twitter, your Twitch. I hear you're, a great Elden Ring player. That
No,
was a joke. That was a
no.
joke, by the way.
I have
I know
nothing
you're
to plug.
horrible.
What's the name of the podcast, Andrew?
No name of the podcast. It'll actually just be a YouTube video on
Well,
my
you're supposed to call it
data.
a podcast.
I guess I'll call it. I wanted to call it an interview.
Oh,
That's what it is. Yeah,
that's what your YouTube channel name is? Just interview?
just the interview. Yeah,
That's a good name. The
I
interview?
know. I might get copyrighted though by who was it? Seth Rogen
Did he name?
or Dave Franco? That
Oh,
movie
what that
in South
was?
Korea.
Yeah, it was literally called The Interview, wasn't it?
Yeah, shit. Okay, I'll have to workshop.
Yeah, back to the drawing board.
Yeah, back to the drawing board. All right. Well, I appreciate you, coming and sharing about what you do as a Strawberry Finance Manager and a little bit about your background, how you got there, and what you do on a day to day. So appreciate your time, and I'll catch you later.
Yep. Thanks, Andrew.